Unleash the fury, you might say. The M1 Abrams tank is officially part of the Ukrainian arsenal. Imagine the roar of a tank jet engine mixed with the destructive power of a 120mm smoothbore gun. The M1 Abrams is the ultimate machine in modern warfare and will help Ukraine turn the tide of the war. The M1 Abrams is expected to decimate Russian opposition tanks, crushing the morale of their conscripts and ending their occupation. You're not going to want to miss this exclusive look at the M1 Abrams and its role in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. How the M1A2 Abrams will ruin Putin's delusions of grandeur. The M1 Abrams is not the only modern tank to arm Ukrainian brigades. Ukraine is also adding Challengers, Leopard 2s, and the French were talking about sending AMX Leclercs. Russia is armed with T-90s and T-90Ms. Even the T-90M still does not quite match up to the M1A2 Abrams, and if the T-90M is no match, then the T-72 is less significant in theoretical terms. We will therefore compare the T-90M and the M1A2 Abrams in the following parts of this video. The success of a tank depends on three things. If we exclude training for now, which is probably the most important thing, these factors are mobility, firepower, and protection. Similar mobility characteristics can be found between the T-90M and the M1A2 Abrams. Both tanks have tracks, which give them the ability to move well off-road and through rough terrain. The top speeds of the T-90M are 37 miles per hour on the road and 25 miles per hour off-road, while the top speeds of the M1A2 are 42 miles per hour on the road and 30 miles per hour off-road. Both tanks have cutting-edge suspension systems that make it easy for them to move across rough terrain. On the other hand, the M1A2 Abrams has a gas turbine engine, making it a more potent and efficient power source. Now, in terms of firepower, the T-90M has a 125mm smoothbore gun, while the Abrams has a 120mm smoothbore gun. The A2's 120mm gun is the very potent Rheinmetall RH-120. It gives the Abrams an edge in terms of accuracy. Both weapons have similar application ranges depending on their ammunition. Both tanks have stabilized guns, but the Abrams has a better fire control system, giving it the edge. The Russian T-72 and T-90 have faster firing rates than the Abrams, but the Abrams fire control system makes it more effective. When it comes to armor protection, the Abrams is by far the better tank. The M1A2's armor is specifically made to withstand shape-charged warheads and kinetic energy penetrators. Russians mainly use explosive reactive armor, which the Abrams also has access to. The Abrams outclasses the T-72 and T-90 tanks on the battlefield. However, it is important to note that the most important factors have not yet been covered: training and the ability of the Abrams to fight in darkness and fog. Many experts feel that this is where the battles will be won. Is the Abrams on the verge of making history in Ukraine? The M1 Abrams started development during the Cold War to destroy Soviet T-64, T-72, and T-80 tanks in conventional warfare. It seems like its chance has arrived, not in the Fulda Gap in Central Europe, but in the perfect tank warfare terrain of Ukraine. The biggest tank battle in history was fought at Kursk, just inside the Russian border, close to eastern Ukraine. On that occasion, the Russians won, defending their motherland. Ukraine is the occupied territory this time, soon to be armed with the tank that has won a major tank battle in the modern era. During the 1991 Gulf War, a major tank battle took place at Medina Ridge. This event happened in the sands of southern Iraq, not far from the city of An Nasiriyah. US and coalition forces faced off against the Iraqi Republican Guard, an elite unit of the Iraqi military armed with T-72 tanks manufactured in the Soviet Union. The 2nd Brigade of the United States 1st Armored Division led the American soldiers into battle in the M1A1 Abrams tanks. After several hours, the Abrams prevailed, destroying more than 80 Iraqi tanks and thus rendering the Republican Guard ineffective. Not only was the Republican Guard dug in, but the battle was fought during daylight with almost perfect visibility. Just imagine what the M1A1 can do at night or in fog against a struggling Russian military. Imagine what the M1A2, the supremely updated version of the M1A1, can do at night, but more about that later in the video. The training edge. Tank crews training is one of the most important parts of modern tank warfare. If we assume that Ukraine will receive high-quality training in the use of the M1A2, which we have no reason to doubt, we must assume that the benefits of training will give them an advantage. Furthermore, the Abrams may have a definite advantage in all-weather fighting capabilities. People think that American tank crew training is a little bit better than Russian tank crew training, though this varies from one training center to the next. The real advantage is in the funding that the US can push into tank crew training. In that sense, Russia cannot compete. So it makes sense that the training for the American tank crews would be better. If that same standard is applied to Ukrainian tank crews, then they will have the advantage for sure. Training also gives soldiers an edge because it boosts their morale and makes them want to fight. Since Ukraine was invaded by Russia and the former regularly bombing civilian targets, we can safely assume the Ukrainians are motivated. In stark contrast, Russia is fast turning into a conscript army. Conscription has never been a good way to fight any war. Now, one might argue that Ukraine also has conscripts, but Ukraine has the motivation, a better command structure, and they don't throw troops away. If anything, that makes for a motivated army. The winning edge. When you have an advantage in a particular area, you will not pass up an opportunity to capitalize on it. War and combat are about obtaining and retaining the initiative. The M1A2 Abrams outperforms the T-72 and T-90 at night and in low-light conditions. Tanks like the T-72 and T-90 have night vision equipment that allow the crew to function in low-light environments. Image intensifiers boost the light around them to make it easier to see. Thermal imaging cameras use heat signatures to build a thermal image of the environment. The night vision systems of the T-72 and T-90 may not be as high-tech as the M1A2 Abrams, though. The crew of the M1A2 Abrams tank can see better at night thanks to new night vision technologies like better thermal imaging cameras and image intensifiers. The M1A1 is the only tank that has the hunter-killer feature, which lets the tank commander use a second thermal imaging camera to find and designate targets without the gunner. The gunner then engages the designated targets in sequence. With better ways to fight in darkness, the Ukrainians could launch full-scale attacks at night or use their tanks to attack key positions in the Russian lines. Raids ensure the destruction of key enemy positions and resources while retaining your own. With the arrival of Bradley fighting vehicles, Swedish CV-90s, and French AMX-10s, the Ukrainian infantry will be able to move and fight with their new American and European tanks if full-scale attacks are planned. Let's not forget that the M1A2 Abrams is not the only modern tank going to Ukraine. The United Kingdom is sending 13 Challenger 2s, and Germany and other European countries are sending Leopard 2 tanks. These tanks are all seen as superior to the Russian versions. Of all the tanks, only the Abrams is battle-tested and against the type of tanks Ukraine is facing. Do you think that the Russian tanks have a chance against the M1 in Ukrainian hands? Or do you think the hype regarding the Abrams M1 is overstated? Please feel free to let us know in the comments below. We appreciate you viewing Military Minds and hope you'll consider subscribing for future episodes. Have a good one, and I'll catch you in the next exciting installment.